And welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body of 23rd of January 2017. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. I would first ask members to appoint a chairman for this meeting, please.
Councillor Dryborough.
Good afternoon, members. Welcome to the Local Review Body of Monday, 23rd of January 2007 at 2 p.m. I'll remind members that this is recorded and is open to 2017. So, right joke. Good start, eh? Good start. I'll remind members that this is being recorded and is open for public listening purposes. Can I ask the clerk to take the reviewer through the documents and papers for the meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm there are two notices of review for consideration at this meeting. We've got item 4 on the agenda, site adjacent to Blythwood, Whitesprings, Annan, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of Dwellinghouse. That's case 16P40193. And I'll just draw members' attention to the list of documents as it appears on page 3 of the published papers, that number 4, which is the applicant's response to observations of the appointed officer, that there aren't any, so that should come out. You have before you the index of the contents. 1, the notice of review and related documents. 2, report on handling and related correspondence. 3, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's notice of review. A new 4, which is the planning application form, plans and supporting documents. 5, decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council. 6, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan. And 7, photos of application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are on pages 6 to 8, and the proposal is contrary to policy H3 of the Local Development Plan and the accompanying supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside, and that no suitable small building group exists at the locality, and therefore the proposed dwelling house would not be within or well related to a small building group. Local Development Plan Policy H3 and national policy as set out in the Scottish Planning Policy permit the erection of new houses in the countryside only in special circumstances identified in development plans, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. Requested method of determination. The applicant has requested that the review be dealt with by means of an inspection of the land which is subject of the review. C, the grounds stated in the notice of review. In summary, the stated view of the applicant as presented is as follows. 1, the application was refused as being contrary to LDP policy H3, but this policy clearly states that the council will support housing proposals in the countryside where the proposal meets one or more of the following criteria, or is defined as 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other and which create a sense of place. The site complies with this statement. 2, the LDP supplementary guidance states that infill sites will be considered favourably. An infill site can be defined as a small gap in a continuous line of built development where it is locate 1 or 2 houses which the site also complies with as shown on the site plans. And 3, within the LDP vision under what will Dumfries and Galloway look like in 20 years' time, there will be opportunities in the rural area for economic development, housing and recreation. There will also be a viable rural economy and community characteristics by more rural businesses, more houses in small groups and more recreational activity. The site fits all of these points. There is a rural business on the adjacent site. It would provide more housing in a small group. Rural business provides more recreational activity in the adjacent swimming pool that already exists. 4, the review of planning permission 15P40256 highlighted that had the application been considered to be part of a small building group, the guidance would only have permitted one dwelling rather than the 2 proposed. Understand that appropriate considered sites will only be able to expand by a maximum of 1/3 of the existing size of the group, and this application is for 1 dwelling with 3 existing houses that constitute as infill. The site does create a sense of place as shown in aerial views. It does not create any loss of rural character or dominate the view, does not interfere with farmland access, has no objections from the roads officer, complies with infill criteria in that existing houses continue the building line and will be viewed in its landscape settings. You also have in the documents the key development plan policies as outlined, and the main issues for you to consider today: does the proposal conform with relevant development plan policies, particularly local development plan policy H3? This includes consideration of whether or not the locality meets the requirements set out in the supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside to be considered a small building group. If not, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? Having outlined the documents within your papers, now falls to you to determine whether you have sufficient information to consider the review, and it's confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. The options available to you for this and the following case today are that you can decide you have sufficient information before you to enable you to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations, resolve to hold a hearing, resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, and if you resolve that you have sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then you have the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. Decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. A planning advisor is present at your meeting. Robert is here to assist for both items. It's confirmed that he has not had any involvement in either case and was not the case officer or the appointed officer for either application. He's purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning, policy, law or process to the local review body. So if all members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the Chairman now to lead the debate and decide if you have sufficient information before you to make a determination today. Thank you.
Thanks. Members, I intend to go through the papers just for clarification purposes first. So if we go back to the notice of review and related documents, pages 5 to 32, and see if there is any clarification that is sought from members of the LRB. None of that. Clarification on the report and handling related correspondence, pages 33 to 45. The observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's notice of review, pages 47 to 50. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just a point of clarification. Maybe Robert could help in this regard, because Robert and I have both previously sat on a very similar appeal stroke review in regards to this case. And we've both been able, under paragraph 1.5 on page 49, Chairman, that doesn't reflect at all in regards to the decision that was made, or certainly the comments were made round about the table in Annan Town Hall at that time. And I'll be clear in regards to that. It's not a criticism. It may well be what come out in regards to the minuted decision of that meeting, but there was 4 members on that particular review. 3 of them actually stated at the time that they very much seen it as being a small build group, but because of the criteria that didn't affect that, it was more than 33% of the actual. It was more than 33%, which is contained within our criteria within the supplementary planning guidance. On those reasons in particular, was the reasons for to decide not to uphold or that review at that time. So I feel that should be pointed out at this stage. It is an appropriate time to bring it up, Chairman.
Thank you, Robert. Do you want to add anything?
Thanks, Chair. The comments at 1.5 on page 49 are obviously the observations of the appointed officer, so that's the appointed officer's view on the case. And what they're saying is the reduction from 2 dwelling houses to 1 dwelling house under the present application doesn't change the development plan policies and considerations, so has no material impact on the principle of the development in terms of the report and the view of the appointed officer. So their commentary there, and I'm reading that on their view on the principle of this development, rather than a commentary on what happened at the previous meeting.
Can I come back in?
I mean, the reason I raise it is because the starting of that actual paragraph states clearly the local review body, which undertook a site visit on the 9th of June last year, and it goes to say agreed the assessment in determining the review, and it goes on and carried out. So there's a clear correlation between the two, and that's why I thought it's important that it's reflected. Maybe it'll come out further in the debate, but certainly 3 of the 4 members at that time felt differently from that, actually, what's explained in there. And if members on this committee, I mean, they're still entitled in which to make a decision whether they want to go on a site visit or not, and maybe you'll come to that at some point. May or may not happen, but for the sake of it, isn't it? I think it's clear the previous members how they felt.
If we can sort of stick to what's in the papers now and then come to that decision later on for that, okay? So the next part is plan application form, plans, supporting documents for points of clarity. Sorry, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me back in. Let me in. Yes, still on 3, similar to what Ian was saying, the top of page 50, as it's been already mentioned, the number of units is not relevant to the consideration of this review. Do we know if the applicant sought pre-application advice on that matter? Because I seem to recall reading elsewhere that they feel that they thought this would be helpful in reducing it from 2 to 1, and clearly it wasn't. It's not the main issue. So I don't know if anybody can answer that point, or they just went off on their own and didn't check first.
Robert, I don't know if there's been pre-application advice sought.
I'm not aware of any pre-application advice that was sought in between the previous local review body meeting and the application that's under consideration today, coming in as a planning application. The way I'm reading the advice from, or the comments, observations of the appointed officer rather, at 1.6, so that's in page 49 to what page 50, is when the appointed officer is looking at policy H3 and what's contained within that, they don't feel that the principle of the development meets that policy. So therefore, the number of units, the matters of detail, are a kind of secondary issue because the principle of the development at that location isn't met. But that's obviously, as I say, that's the view, those are the observations of the appointed officer. That's the way I'm reading that one. They don't feel that the principle of the development is met as it's set out in that policy H3.
Happy with that? Okay. Can we go on to the decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council, pages 65 to 69? Any points of clarification needed on that? Thank you. The relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, pages 71 to 106. That's pretty straightforward. That's a normal sort of input to these local review bodies. And the photos of applications on the site, 170, 113. Have you want something, Robert?
Chair, there is a slide presentation available here if members want to see those same photographs on the big screen.
I think we should see the photographs and then go through there, and then we'll go on to the options available to local review body, okay?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, these slides are fairly self-explanatory, and as I say, they replicate the ones you have in your papers. It's just that the visual quality is that much better, and they're in colour. This is the application site. It's looking from the front of the site, if you like, so it's looking to the north. You can just see the remnants of Chapel Cross Power Station there on the horizon slightly, slightly rising ground there. The next one is looking more, panning around to the northwest. Again, from the front of the site, you can see Blythwood in the background. That's the Dwellinghouse you can see there that also has the swimming pool associated with it. And this is looking west across the site. Again, you can see Blythwood there, the established Dwellinghouse. This is looking in the opposite direction. So this is across to the northeast, across the application site at the boundary with Blythwood in the foreground there, and you can see the development across the road, which you can see in closer detail here. So this is the unclassified public road, the U204A. It's the southeastern corner of the application site on your left-hand side, and this is looking towards Black Hills Farm. So you can see two dwelling houses there. The single-storey house in the foreground, obviously more recent than the 1.5-storey house with the dormers behind and the chimneys. That's a view showing visibility at the junction. Same public road, that's looking towards the south, so towards Annan. And that's in the opposite direction, looking north. And again, you can see Black Hills Farm on the right-hand side there. So the access to that farm is just in front of that wheelie bin there. And that shows you the arrangement at Black Hills Farm in slightly greater detail. Coming back to Blythwood, that gives you an idea of the appearance, character, finishes of that building. I mean, I would emphasise, obviously, there is a swimming pool located to the left of that as you look at it, but I don't have any photographs of that to show you today.
Thanks, Robert. Okay then, so the options available to the local review body for this in the following case are that it can decide it has sufficient information before it to enable to determine the review today. We can request further information in the form of written representation. The LRB will be required to state precisely the information it is seeking and who must provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who will be invited to speak on what matters, or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, and this can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but we'd obviously not allow a decision to be made today. And if the local review body resolves that has sufficient information that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the full powers to uphold, reverse, or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. So I actually think we have enough information to make a decision today, and the reason I'll tell you why is because I know that the local review body did have a previous site meeting and it was the application for 2 houses. And speaking to one of the members who were actually on that site visit, they felt that one house would actually fit into that location rather well. And when you're looking at the applicant's actual reasons for notice of review, is defined as 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other. I think in this case, the house is well related to the other. It has a natural boundary with a road going up to the Chapel Cross site on the right-hand side and has a house on the left-hand side of it. I think we've got enough to make the decision today, but that's up to you members how you want to go with that.
Unfortunate, I know the area, and I did have a site visit as part of that site visit previously. Certainly added value at the time, but certainly I don't need a site visit because I'm quite clear on what I'm looking at there. I understand it, and I was had a similar view to obviously the person you've been speaking to away from here. Without coming to a conclusion, certainly at this point in time, but I'd like to put my thoughts again across. But I personally don't need a site visit, Chairman.
Anybody else? Are we happy to make a decision today then? Yep. Okay. Right, well, we'll open up for comments then. Ian, you want to come?
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, knowing the place, it's you've got Blythwood, Whitesprings and Black Hills, 3 different individual buildings, very, very within close proximity of each other. I mean, I'm kind of looking back and refer back to 1.5, not being critical at all on page 49. There's a statement there that doesn't reflect the previous view, and I just think my view hasn't really changed in it to any great degree when it comes to that. I know this is a different application, it's a different case, but it's concurring really with what you're saying just earlier in your own statements, Chairman, in as far as I think it does have cohesion, it's a sense of place, it's cohesion, it has all these things, and it's outlined within the case that's put forward. If Dumfries and Galloway Council, I think, is serious about having a viable, sustainable rural economy, this fits that bracket in particular. So I'm keen to support it, Chairman. I'd like to see it being supported, but certainly also keen, as always, to hear the views of other members of the committee.
Ian?
I'm certainly not strongly opposed to that. It's my understanding of a small building group. If it was to be considered as on one side of the road, you have a farm and an associated building that may or may not have a Section 75 as part of that farm. And I'm a bit surprised with Blythwood that it sits well out on its own, and I don't know if there are any relevance to find out, is there a Section 75 on that building as well?
Well, what have you?
And the simple answer, I'm afraid, to both questions, the farm and Blythwood, is I simply don't know. I'm afraid, Chair. I could find out, but today I don't know, I'm afraid.
Alistair, do you want to
Sorry,
comment?
can I
Sorry,
just come
Ian.
back? Can I come back? Assuming that there was a Section 75 on either, would that affect the existence of a small building group?
No, Chair, and I'll explain that. I mean, looking at the delegated report, what I think is key, I mean, again, we've covered this in the clerk's briefing notes, but looking at the report and handling, what becomes clear to me is the key consideration and principle is policy H3 of your LDP. That is the key policy and principle. So when I look at paragraphs 4.3, 4.4 and 4.5 in the officer's report, she's testing the development against policy H3. Now, it's not an identified small building group, that's clear, it's not on the list in the LDP. So the question then is, does it meet the criteria that's set out in that policy as a small building group? Now, her conclusion is that it doesn't, and on that basis, the development's not acceptable in principle. And really the key thing is testing the site, testing the group of buildings, testing the number of houses, do they relate well to each other, do they create a sense of place, do they meet the definition of a small building group as set out in that policy and supplementary guidance, and on that basis, is the development acceptable in principle? Those are really the clear tests in this case. So whether or not an existing dwelling house nearby is subject to Section 75 agreement or not doesn't really matter. There's obviously an existing dwelling house there. It's making a contribution to the setting of this application site. It's another dwelling house next to the site, if you like. So you should take that dwelling house into account if you're looking at it as a group or a cluster or a number of houses, I would suggest. But your key thing I would suggest, Chair, is looking at this in terms of what policy H3 of your LDP says.
Alistair, do you want to go in there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest a site visit, but I found seeing the slides useful and put a picture in my mind of the site and its setting. I did listen to I did read the report, of course, and it seemed to me that initially I thought the road actually breaks up the site into two units, but having seen the slides, I'm more favourably disposed. But I take it what we have here is a planning permission in principles, because I think what would be crucial if we approve this is that we have a building which does reflect the character of the surrounding buildings. So it's not so much a question as more an observation.
David, you want to say anything?
Chair, I think I don't think the conditions haven't changed since the last LRB met, and it was considered that it was not a small building group, and that was the required criteria then, and that I don't think that has changed. And as such, we've got a couple of pages where it's showing off how infill sites and that sort of thing, and I don't think we can comply with that either, because you've got divisions through the road. Page 80, I think there's another page as well, actually, but you've got on that page as well, you've got the naturally contained site, and you've got an infill site at the top, and then down at the bottom you've got acceptable and unacceptable urban development. Well, it certainly doesn't fall into urban development, and it's not what you'd class. I wouldn't class it as a naturally contained site, and there's no house at the other side. There's only one house there. You're just filling in to the road, and you've got a gap caused by the road. And as such, I don't think we're fulfilling the criteria that's required under this planning guidelines. So That's my view at the present moment, Chair.
Ian?
Suppose this is the last time I'll say this, but I thought that may well have come up, that particular point about the previous decision and the decision we're looking at now, and that's why I emphasised the point in page 49, paragraph 1.5, because I do strongly believe that I know for a fact, without doubt, by being the President and Robert was there as well, that the majority view of the previous decision that the Council took was certainly that this did actually adhere to the policies and it did constitute a small building group. So, I mean, that's why the only reason it's last, I'll leave it at that point, but I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think I've probably made my mind up, Chairman, so, and that would be in order to support what's in front of us today in regards to just one only.
My own personal view is I think this is an infill site. And one of the issues I would like to see is obviously it would be contrary to policy H3. However, when you look at the permission erection of houses, which is well related to a small building, although this is not a small, it is well related to the particular buildings that are actually there. And there is a natural boundary on two sides, three sides actually, where the building can actually go. And I'm of a mind to actually approve this because of that particular reason. And if it needs a motion to grant, I'm quite happy to do that. But it would obviously be subject to the, as it's planning in principle, it would be subject to the ongoing conditions and that of the officers.
Chair, could we see the photograph of the application site again, please?
Sorry, say again?
Do you see get the photograph up of the application site, please?
Yep. Robert, can you put the photograph back up, please?
But my concern, Chair, is the size of that site. Given that the planning officer does not consider that it fits in with the planning regulations that we're talking about here, and given the size of that site, I think if we allow one house on that site, we're heading into trouble. I'd be very concerned about it. And where we don't know what the proposed size of the house is, where it's going to be sited or anything like that. And I'd be very concerned at the granting this application.
It's planning in principle only at the end of the day, David. So any future application would have to come to a full application at the end of the day. My suggestion is that we approve the planning in principle for one house only and then move forward that way.
I'm going to object to Chair, so it doesn't matter. But now you're obviously, as we've spoken about these things before, you've got your view, I've got my view, and as I say, I'd go with the officer's recommendation at the present moment.
Robert, you want to come in?
Chair, if it was helpful, just to clarify that the application is for the erection of a dwelling house, just a single dwelling house, and it is an application for planning permission in principle. The only other thing I just wanted to clarify was in relation to the previous local review body meeting, yes, there was a lot of debate around about the small building group question, but ultimately at that local review body, the majority of members there opted to uphold the previous officer's decision, so that included the reasons for the previous decision. So that was the minuted decision, but there was a lot of discussion around about the small building group issue and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Ian, do you want to come in?
No, thanks very much, Chairman. No, I mean, Robert's absolutely right when he says that, but the only point I was saying that it was unanimous, the decision to refuse it on the grounds that it was too, made it quite clear that we did feel it was was looking back and rehearsing it. I totally respect what Jock's saying in regards to his views. I think he's absolutely entitled to them and respect that, but I would support that we do actually approve in this case, because it does have a sense of place and so on and so forth, as it's alluded to in regards to the supporting documentation from the applicant themselves. And I would formally move that, Chairman, that we do actually approve this. And obviously citing in character, I think Alistair, Councillor Witch has referred to that, he's citing it should be in keeping and so on and so forth, even though it's planning principle. That's obviously, I think, a standard condition that should absolutely be in there.
Ian?
Yeah, I've got certain sympathies with what Councillor McKee said. I think that by granting a single dwelling house, we're in fact creating a small building group for the future that's going to have a vacant site. But I think we have to deal with this one that's here before us. that I would probably support the approval of a single dwelling.
So, Jock, have you got anybody second you? No. So I think the decision is then that we approve this planning in principle for one dwelling house on the site as an exception to policy H3 as an infill site, and it's a planning in principle, the full planning. Ian?
I'm just wondering, because it is difficult to try and get your heads around about the plan application committee in this committee here. I don't know if we have to make an exception to policy with this committee. I wouldn't mind some guidance in regards to that, or is this whatever the decision this committee stroke review body takes? I think it's probably the decision, but happy to take. I would really keen to take guidance with that.
I think just coming back to the comments that the officer says, if I can find it. Decision notice will include.
Chairman, what you're agreeing today is to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and therefore approve the application subject to ongoing conditions for one house only. My understanding is that obviously if you're reversing the decision, it has to be for planning reasons. So it was just for the record, just so they're clear for the minute of the meeting, if you could just make these clear.
I just see Carl Henshaw was very, very clear on this. He's now you come back to this is a brand new application. You look at it and you determine it under your own merits. So you rehearse that again and again and again. That's what's sticking in my mind, and that's why I asked that, which is different from the plan application committee, which is exactly what you've just said, Claire. That's how we do determine it. Because if it's been a recommendation from an officer, but it's still indeterminate at that point, but there's actually been a decision made in this case, obviously. So it's de facto we're going back to scratch, and we're actually making we've removed delegations, my understanding at this point, and we're actually determining this application as a committee ourselves without any recommendations whatsoever. And I think that's potentially the difference. But still, again, happy to take advice. Your word comes before mine. I'm just talking from my experience.
It's my limited experience that if you're reversing the appointed officer's decision, you have to give the reason why you're therefore approving the application contrary to the advice of the appointed officer. So therefore you're saying that it does meet the terms of planning policy H3 insofar as the infill site and for one dwelling house only.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of reflected on it's page 11, even though it's no marked. And it's the second part to the support and documentation. You look at the very last paragraph, and the points that they pick out are similar to what I'm thinking myself when they're saying that it does create a sense of place, and that's demonstrated through the aerial view which has been supplied. It does not create any loss of rural character or dominate the view, and it does so. Therefore, it does not interfere with farmland access. The objections is a red herring, I'll say, so to speak, as I already alluded to. That doesn't really matter in regards to objections, unless it was from an agent that we have to, obviously a consult, somebody we need to consult, like the Roads Authority, SEPA, or whoever. But I mean, and that's what I'm trying to get to the point. I think if we're looking at this for de facto, that is, I would see it in the same light as what's been outlined there, and it is outside. And it's a different view from certainly from the case officer. I think it's the same case officer, maybe for both applications previously, but certainly for this one we're looking at here, it's a different view.
What did you want to come in?
Just a couple of observations. Yes, it's got to be a de novo consideration today. As a local review body, you're doing that with all cases. It might be a review of a case, but you're making a fresh decision on it. So you have to have your reasons for doing so and make those clear, obviously. The only other comment I was going to make really was, if you're minded to grant it, are you going to grant it subject to conditions? And if so, as an LRB, do you have any strong preference or guidance you want to give as to what conditions those should be? I mean, there's a fairly standard set of conditions for planning permission in principle, which reserve the submission and agreement of matters of detail until a further application known as approval of matters specified in conditions. But you might want to have a think about that if you're wanting to give particular guidance to myself and the clerk on the conditions you want to see attached. to this permission if you're minded to grant it, which
Yeah.
it sounds like, then now's maybe the time to have a think about that.
Ian, do you want to?
I mean, I think you've got your standard roads conditions, CPAS, or your, what would apply to your building regs, but I think Alistair, maybe he's got to bring it up, but I thought siting and character is quite important, to say the least. It needs to be in character, it needs to be at a reasonable size, shouldn't be over domineering and so on and so forth. But I think if we've got a clear understanding of what a standard conditions are, sometimes they can be limited to 8, right up to 24, depending on the particular application. So, I mean, but that's probably what's sticking out. You've got your safety around about roads in particular on that site. Potentially will make sure they do comply. It reflects within the roads officer that they do comply with that, they can comply with that. But siting and character, I think what Alistair brought up earlier is very important.
Alistair?
Yeah, Ian's more or less said it, but I think the design of this house, when it comes back, it'll be challenging, because you're going to have to marry two basically different styles of architecture, in my view. I'm not an expert in grand designs, but I think this is something that we'll have to scrutinise very carefully before we finally approve it. So I would really be anxious to see that in there.
Okay. So the decision is to approve with those conditions, one house, the conditions that was mentioned before from Ian. I'm not going to say it word for word.
And I think it's just importantly to reflect the character of the surrounding buildings.
Yeah. Okay, we're happy with that? Apart for you, Jock.
Wish your dissent recorded, Councillor McKee.
Aye, why not? Okay, thank you. We move on to item 5, which is Grainneshead, Moniaive, Thornhill, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of Dwellinghouse. You want to take? It's just me to go through this.
Thank you, Chairman. The next item is, if I'm pronouncing this properly, Grainneshead, Moniaive, Thornhill, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of Dwellinghouse, case 16P30224. You have the index of contents in your papers, which is a notice of review and related documents, report on handling and correspondence, observations of the appointed officer and the applicant's notice of review, planning application form, plans and supporting documents, decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, photos of application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are that the proposed development is contrary to policy 0P of the Local Development Plan, and that the proposed development would introduce an inappropriate form of infill development defined as backland in the supplementary guidance on design quality on new development. That would not be in keeping with existing character, appearance and pattern of frontage development of the surrounding area. Requested method of determination. The applicant has requested that the review be dealt with by means of an inspection of the land which is subject of the review. The grounds stated in the notice of review, in summary, the stated view of the applicant as presented is as follows. 1. The development would conform with the brownfield guidelines and would not prevent or restrict the physical development of an allocated site, nor is it of a scale to adversely affect the overall development strategy of the plan. 2. The proposal would not result in a potential loss of privacy. No removal of the hedge on either side of the boundary would take place. Not one neighbour has objected to the planning application, and we struggle to understand why a person who does not live in the area of the proposed site can come up with a refusal. The proposed site would in no way impose on any of our neighbours. 3. We are of the understanding that Moniaive is a designated infill area and did not realise that it would be so difficult to get planning permission as it was granted 10 years ago on appeal. 4. There is currently a driveway down the full length of the property, Grainneshead, where 4 vehicles are kept. One of the objections stated was restricted access to the U393N and U593N public road. Please note that at present a 27-foot long motorhome is presently taken in and out of the access regularly with no problems. You have before you again the development plan policies, supplementary guidance and other material considerations. The main issues for you to consider today: does the proposal conform with relevant development plan policies, and critically, does it comply with the local development plan policy OP2 and the associated adopted supplementary planning guidance on design quality of new development in respect of its relationship to the existing character, appearance and pattern of frontage development of the surrounding area? If not, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted as an exception to policy? What weight, if any, does the LRB wish to give to the fact that there was previously an application for outline planning permission for a dwelling house on the site, which was refused on 7th of July 2006, and which was granted outline planning permission after having been the subject of an appeal on 12th of March 2007. This outline planning permission having expired as unspent many years ago and having been granted in the context of different development plan. So having outlined these documents, now falls to you today to determine whether you have sufficient information to consider the review, and it's confirmed again that there are no representations from any party that will be heard today. Thank you.
And this time, members, we'll just go through the photographs first, and then we'll go to the documentation inside and points of clarity on that, okay? Robert, do you want to?
Thanks, Chair. Just as last time, for clarity's sake, these are the same as the pictures in the papers. Obviously, they're a lot clearer and they're in colour. It's a view of the application site to the rear of Grainneshead. This is viewed from the north. So Grainneshead is a terrace property. It'll become clearer as we move along. The dark green kind of crinkly tin corrugated iron garage on the right-hand side there is the back corner of one side of the rear garden area. You can see the picnic bench and the kind of white gable just to the left-hand side of the middle of the shot. That is the rear elevation of Grainneshead itself. So it's a terrace property, but this will become slightly clearer. So where this is taken from, the kind of patch of nettles, if you like, is a bit of waste ground just to the rear of this property. You can see this here. You've got the trailer, an old kind of what looks like a fishing container and other stuff on this wasteland. Grainneshead is the property in the white there with the chimney and the gable that you can see there. So this is looking south towards the application site. The application site is part of the garden ground between where the photos taken here and the white elevation there. That's the rear elevation of Grainneshead. This is in the opposite direction. This is the existing driveway to the western side of Grainneshead. So this is looking towards the previous camera position, which is some distance away. So this is the driveway that can accommodate up to 4 vehicles and where the motorhome, 27-foot motorhome, is accommodated. And that's coming straight out onto this public road where the camera is taken from, the picture rather. That's further up the same driveway, and it's looking up towards that dark green outbuilding, which is roughly in the corner of the garden area. This is getting right up to the back of the garden area, so to the application site itself. And then looking across kind of diagonally, this is more to the application site proper. And you can see it's part of quite a large rear garden area to Grainneshead. And that's panning round slightly. This is looking now more due east, so it's quite a sizable area of land associated to the rear of that house. And you can see the outbuildings and so on and so forth. The Grains and Grains house are just on the left-hand side there. And that shows Grainneshead. That's looking back down the driveway. You can see it's just grass there towards the public road, just where that red van's located.
Thank you, Robert. We can go through the, for points of clarity, through the paperwork in pages 119 and 124 is a notice of review and related documents. Any points of clarification required on that? No. Pages 125 to 131 is report on handling and correspondence. Any points of clarification on that? Pages 135 to 137 is the observation of the appointed officer on the applicant's notice of review. Any points of clarification? Pages 139 to 155, the planning application form, plans and supporting documents. Any points of clarification? The decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council, page 157 to 161. Any points of clarification? The relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway local development plans. Again, that's just in every document that we have in front. 163 to 227, and then the photos of the application. Okay. Members, have we got anything to say on this, Ian?
Just one, we've seen photographs of the site. Do we have actually a map of the site where it shows the site in relation to the other dwelling? Site location map?
I don't think there is. I've not seen one. I think in the last map that was given by the applicant rather as the officers. But
Chair, if it's helpful, there's a plan on page 147 of the papers, and also on page 149, but 147 is probably the most helpful.
Google Maps are great, aren't they?
What I would also say, Chair, is you'll see the footprint of a house on that plan, but please bear in mind this is, again, it's the erection of a single dwelling house, permission in principle. So it's just to establish the principle of a house on that site generally.
Ian?
Can I ask a question of advice, Chairman, in as far as if we're at that stage? It's just about, I think it's the previous decision from the council, then it was superseded by the DPEA, and just what weight material considerations should we give against that? In the back of my mind, what's running through is obviously there's been clear policy changes from the Dumfries and Galloway Council since then. A wee bit of advice in regards to that, Chairman, because I think that's a point that's been made, and does the actual DPEA have any background information? I didn't see it myself, maybe I didn't pick up on it, why they took their position?
Well, before I start going, I'll go into the actual question. Are we happy with the information that we've actually got? We can actually make a decision on this today, and if so, Robert, have you got some advice for Ian? I know he needs a lot of advice.
The previous appeal decision obviously dates back to March 2007 when we had the set of old local plans, and the structure plan was still in force back then. The LDP superseded all of those things in September 2014, so it's the key thing now, and there's adopted supplementary design guidance as well. Now, the appointed officer, the case officers obviously assessed this case. They've looked at that appeal statement as well. It's, at the time they looked at it, it's a 9-year-old appeal statement. It's referencing the old local plan, the old structure plan. They've looked at this application in terms of the present guidance, the present policy, and they've assessed it against that. They've given some weight relative to the old appeal decision, but they've thought over the piece that, you know, my reading of it is they don't think it complies with policy. They've given reasons why. They've seen the previous appeal decision, but having considered the reasons why that appeal was granted, they still don't think that this proposal complies with the development plans, so they've refused it. So basically they haven't given the previous appeal decision that much weight. In terms of how much weight you give it as a local review body, that's entirely at your own discretion, how much weight you give another material consideration. I mean, the appeal decision is material to the case. It's just a question of how much weight you want to give it relative to other matters.
Ian?
I suppose, I mean, that's the answer I hope to hear, and it's how material, and obviously it's for us to determine at that point, but I suppose, which is right now, and that, from my perspective, not only have we had a change at LDP, a local development plan, we're getting to the second stage of that, a new local development plan, which will be LDP2, so there's constant changes. I don't see any realignment going back to the previous historical decision made by the DPA, but I'm always open-minded in regards to these, Chairman, but my personal views, I haven't seen it demonstrated to that point because of such a material change in policies.
Anybody else want to speak on this? I'm of a view to go with the officer's recommendation on this particular one because of the reasons suggested by both the appointed officer and the advice given here by Robert, and I would put that forward. Alistair?
Yeah, I think I concur with you, Chair. What swung it for me once again was the photographic evidence and the sighting, and I think I agree with the roads comments in particular. Thank you.
Ian?
The roads safety concerns, that was the thing that really, the 2 points was the material changes in policy at a local level since the DPA March 2007, it says, I think, and the fact it is a material consideration in regards to the road safety. Whether there's ways to mitigate that, we haven't got that demonstrated at this point in time, so no, I would agree with yourself.
So we're happy to go with the recommendation and refuse the application. I'm happy to do that. Jock?
Just on the roads and whatnot, Chair, I think there's a reason for, I don't think there's land in their ownership that they could widen that path in any way. And even on that basis alone, I don't think it would be acceptable. And they're trying to make it that it's a brownfield site. There's no way it's been developed before. If it had been off there before, it would still have been there, I would suggest. So I'm quite happy to go with the officer's recommendations.
Okay, Clark will just agree to the recommendations.
Chairman, just to clarify that you've agreed to uphold decision of the appointed officer that the application be refused on the grounds outlined on page 160 of your papers.
That's agreed. I have no further business. Thanks very much for attending.